some quick fire questions for you, just to prove that you're human and one of us. So, what was your favorite age?
23.
What was it about that age that you loved?
I'd finished uni, I'd been working here, I was living in Dublin, I wasn't saving any money, I was spending it and living my best life. I think that's what it is about that age, yeah. Before you start to think about responsibilities and stuff, yeah, that's what was my favourite.
Brilliant, I love it. What would we find on your nightstand?
You'd find a lamp, a sunrise alarm clock lamp, and my tweezers, and that's it. Yeah, and a nail cutter and a nail file. Yeah, those things.
Brilliant. And give us a snapshot of an everyday small joy.
Normally it involves cake, so some sort of cake. I've been baking loads during lockdown, so there's always cake in the house. So at the moment it's a chocolate orange cake with a homemade Oreo buttercream.
Oh my gosh, amazing.
Yeah,
brilliant. Okay, you're definitely human. I love cake and tweezers. Like it. All right, Pooja, I'm going to hand over to you. Then we're going to have an opportunity for some questions, and then we're going to talk a little bit about kind of starting out as a new project manager and some tips on that. And then, yeah, we'll open up to questions as well. So I'll hand over to you, Pooja. Thank you.
Hi, everyone. Thanks for joining today. I think if you spoke to Jay, she'd say I had a bit of imposter syndrome where she asked me to do this, and then I told her why I think I shouldn't, but this talk should still happen, and maybe there are some people in my network that I could put her in touch with. And she basically said, everything that you've said to me is what I want you to share with the group. So my background and a bit about me is that I'm a civil engineer. So I went to university, studied civil engineering for 3 years, worked abroad for a year during that time, came back, joined a company that I love working for, and have been with them since. Sounds really easy when you say it like that, but it's had loads of ups and downs and different challenges throughout time. So what I do now in construction, looking back, if I knew what I knew now, would I have gone to university and gone down that track? Probably not. I think that, you know, they say that what you use at university, at the beginning, you probably use like 60%, if that, and then it gets less and less, and it just becomes around people management. That's a lot of what it is, and that's where a lot of the transferable skills come in. So just to give you guys a bit of background around the construction industry, there's 3 main parties that exist. So the sector that I work in is civil engineering in construction. I have done work in building and renovations as well. But you have the client, so that's who wants it built. You have the contractor, which is the party that I work for, who get to work and build it. And then you have your designers that do all the designs and the checks that what you're going to build is actually work. And they're the 3 main parties. Each part of that will have its own project set up. So all 3 together make up a project team for the whole project. But then each of those parties has its own mini team as well. So in my project, we'd have a project lead, I have a commercial person, and then you have all your technical people as well. The client similarly has the overall client, they have a technical team, a commercial team that help make sure that what we're delivering is what the client actually wants. And then similarly for the designers, they have their technical team, but they also have project managers. Because I know that we're speaking today to a group of event managers, but a project basically is whatever you guys need to do to make sure an event is successful. the similar skills needed to make sure a project is successful. So the event in construction is, you know, the bridge opening. What do you need to do? So at the moment I'm building a bridge and a road, and the planning is what to get to have that final day when whichever special person it is given the big scissors to cut the ribbon. And that's the event that construction is that you're planning towards, and there's all different things to get there. Now in the middle part that I play, which is the actual delivery, there is some sort of technical knowledge that project managers need, because what we're delivering, I have to be able to answer technical questions. However, I think even though most of my job is still about people and deliverables and things like that. And so in a similar way, I've worked with clients where their project managers, one previous project manager I worked with, they used to look after the royal grounds. So do you know, the Queen owns loads of estates, and they used to look after estates. And so it shows how transferable the skills are, because especially when you have a client project manager, they have a technical team, they have a commercial team that have that specialist knowledge. And the main thing you need from a project manager is to make sure that everyone is delivering what they need to deliver. And that's where you really get the transferable skills. And in my mind, it's actually an advantage. So I know that I have to work harder, and that we have to be, I think the best way to describe it is that I can't be as lazy in my explanations and, you know, making sure that when I'm passing information across, if my counterpart is technical, then you can just say things and things are quicker because I can use all the technical terms and things like that. Whereas when you have a client that's a project manager that isn't as technical, it's my job to explain it to them. That's always my job. So yeah, sometimes it makes my life easier if they're technically minded, but if they're not, it doesn't change what my responsibilities are. So I'm there to build the job for my client. They just want it built, and they want it built with a certain set of constraints, and that's what I have to build to. So that's where the transferable skills and the advantage comes in, is that if I have a counterpart of a project manager that's not as technically minded, they don't sort of deviate, or I'm trying to think of the right way to explain it. So if we have an issue, and I as a contractor have an issue, if a project manager is slightly more technically minded, they may not be as robust in their response because they feel a bit of sympathy, they get where they're going. Whereas if you have someone, and the advantage that you would bring as a project manager is that you're thinking about the business, about the end goal, about how to get there, rather than getting too pulled into the details. So sometimes if my counterpart is too technically minded, they'll get involved in all the nitty gritty and the details, which is not really what the project manager is there for. That's why you have all these specialist teams that sit below you. That's what they're there to do for you. And that's why it's important that the project manager focuses on the end goal, because everyone else is looking at the little details and the little niggles and sorting those out. Whereas I think the most important part of the project manager is to keep focus on what is our end goal, where are we trying to get to? Because sometimes that's what happens, is you get down these little tangents, and before you know it, everyone's spending too much time on these details, whereas you sometimes need someone to pull you out and focus and say, well, what are we all here to do? Build a bridge, get a bridge open. And sometimes when you don't have that preconceived ideas of what construction is, what it should look like, you get some really interesting solutions coming out of people that ask you really simple questions that people that have been in it for so long or have that background wouldn't think to ask, because they just dismiss it. And that's the really big advantage I think there is of having a project manager that isn't from that background. They just bring something different. And that's where your guys' skill would lie, is about saying that your focus is about project delivery. And these clients have a technical team, they have a commercial team. And so why does the project manager need to be technically minded? Why do they need to be savvy. Like the amount that you need to pick up, you'll pick up, but you don't need to know the level of detail sometimes that your engineers need to know, that your quantity surveyors need to know. And that's the important part, and that's the way to sell yourselves. And it's a really big advantage that I don't think the construction industry always takes the most out of. So the clients that I know that have worked with, that have project managers from diverse backgrounds, would be like Highways England, Homes England, Network Rail, all these big companies, and you know, even the developers, Quintain, places like that. And then you have got some construction companies like Mace and ISG, and I have a lot of people that I know. Someone that I went to school with diffused bombs and is now working in the construction industry because they take on people from the armed forces, because the industry is trying to get away from that mindset of an engineer then becomes a project manager, whereas sometimes a project manager just needs to be a really good project manager. And sometimes you have good engineers that become great project managers, but sometimes you have great engineers that become terrible project managers, because it's not always the same skill. So that's what I had to contribute today. I can carry on talking about it forever, but I think that's just an overview of what it is. And so and the important thing is it's something to do with that I've learned off Jay through something else that we're doing, but it's about just being vulnerable. Like I'm quite early on in my career, and if I don't know, I think it's honest just to be and say, I don't know, but I'm going to go and speak to this person, this team, and I've got this resource that I'll go and speak to. I'll check it out and I'll come back to you, because you're not there to do everything. And that's why you have other teams, other people. And that, I think, is the most important thing about being efficient, is using your people effectively. And sometimes that isn't done. And that's what I think the benefit of a non-traditional background can bring to the industry.
Yeah. Amazing, Pooja. Thank you so much. Well, whilst the others are thinking about any questions that they have, I have a question for you. What do you love most about being in the project management industry? So not necessarily specifically in construction, but the idea of project management and being in that kind of world.
I think it is about the people that you work with. So especially in construction, I always say, if you don't think you fit in somewhere, you don't think you fit in anywhere, come to construction. Like you get all sorts of people from all walks of life, from like the people in the ground that are putting stuff in the ground all the way through to your client, and everyone's so different. And also in project management, and I assume it's the same whether it's event planning, or because I always said that if I didn't get into construction, I think I'd want to like organize a huge event, like, do you know, all the logistics that it takes to do a big concert or something like that. That's my out there dream if I wasn't in construction. I think it's the adrenaline, you know, your deadlines, something goes wrong last minute, and it doesn't matter, I think, whether you're event planning, whether you're planning a bridge opening, whatever. There are certain times in a project where it becomes crunch time, and you know, the butterflies come and you're like, oh, this problem's come, and a part of you's like, oh god, it would have been nice if this problem wasn't here. Whereas there's a secret tiny part of you that's like, this is what makes it exciting. Like, this is what makes the job of a project manager so fun, is when you get that last minute problem that you're like, right, this is on us as a team to resolve, let's get to it. And it's that butterfly and that adrenaline, I think, that makes it most fun. I've just seen that come through from Zanisa. I thought I wanted to be an accountant when I was younger. So, and my mom said to me, you're going to be so bored, don't be an accountant. So we went through loads of different careers that used maths to try and find something that would keep me entertained. And I think construction allows me to be an extrovert and, you know, be my true self and not be stuck at a desk normally, because I'm normally on a building site, and allows me to walk around and talk to people and stuff. But yeah, now I'm in it, I couldn't imagine not being in construction.
Any other questions? I definitely have another one. I just give others an opportunity. Oh, no, I'm going. Where do you see, Pooja, having kind of been around other project managers, what kind of trajectory can you see as kind of is normal for project managers? Like what sort of like development can a project manager go into? Does it kind of, for you in construction, does it just go to project manager and that's it? What sort of development opportunity might there be?
No, so a big thing in construction is the value of a project. So I've worked on a project from 2 million euros all the way through to 80 million euros, 80 million pounds. So one thing is the size of project that you're managing. So you could project manage a smaller project, and sometimes the smaller projects have different constraints and different challenges than say a larger project would. So you have that difference, and then you have like senior project managers that would maybe oversee the bigger projects or a more complicated project. Then you have area managers or contracts managers, so that's looking after more than one project. So and then you have normally you go into director levels, so there is still a progression, like it's just the first step onto your like next set of progression.
Okay, brilliant. There are a couple of questions in there. Do you want me to read them out, Pooja?
I've got them here. So Emma's is, you touched on Claire's, are you self-employed or work for a company? So I currently work for a company, John Sisk Sons, but construction does take a lot of agency or self-employed as well. I know with IR35 there are some more restrictions coming into place, but there is a lot of freelance as well as employed. Emma said, you touched on that it hasn't all been plain sailing. What challenges have you faced? What have you learned? So my second year of university, I found really hard. I fell a bit ill and I did have to resit a module. And that was a big learning for me. And then in my third year, I really put in effort to make sure that I got the grades that I wanted. Then from a working point of view, it's just sometimes, you know, I think as with any projects, you get your peaks and your troughs, and it's about working with people, and you do sometimes get conflicts of personality. So it's about learning how to deal with those and how to work with people. Construction heavily, and I think a lot of project management industries rely on people. Like, you're there to manage people and to get a product through working together. And that's been a challenge. I've also moved around a lot. So since graduating in 2014, I've lived in Dublin, Chester, Newcastle, London, now going to Burgess Hill. So, you know, I've moved around a lot, which sometimes does put stresses on your personal life, but I don't think I'd change anything looking back. So Nancy's asked, any companies in construction that are openly recruiting or have a scheme for career changes? There are a lot of schemes out there for like back to work, and you know, people that have taken career breaks, and there are loads of schemes that do, sorry Matthew, especially for women because of the increase in need for diversity and trying to get some change into the industry. There are a few schemes out there. I can't think of them off the top of my head, but I do a bit in the equality and diversity and inclusion sector within construction. So I can pass those details on to Jay and she can share them with the group. And Zanita has to go. Thanks. But yeah, there are, and you know, with the government's whole thing of build, and, you know, all of those things, there will be, even though there are some redundancies in construction, there's probably not as much as other sectors. And some of it is because of companies now needing to restructure how they're doing things. So even though there are redundancies, there is still recruitment happening, especially a lot in the south, and you've got some big projects that are coming on board. So you've got HS2, you've got Lower Thames Crossing, you've got loads of other schemes coming up, and the government a couple of months ago put up their procurement and their funding for projects. So there is a lot coming out. So, and definitely in the client sphere and things like that. So I will pass on to Jay what information I have.
Brilliant. Amazing. Thank you so much, Pooja. And I know that there was a couple of questions that a couple of people wanted to explore around kind of starting out as a new PM. And Matthew, you go first. Let's answer Matthew's question before we get advice.
Yeah, so tendering process. So I constantly get messages from my work winning team, and that's a good point, Matthew, actually. So as well as the actual on-site construction, there's also a whole process of work winning and tendering for projects and that side of things. And that is, there will be bid managers. So again, that I'm so glad you brought that up. There's a whole process of, you know, putting together a tendering package and someone bringing that all together, making sure that you've got, you know, your planners are getting your programs in, that we're getting our quality submissions in, that, you know, it's being packaged up how the client wants it. You know, you have 4 or 5 weeks sometimes to turn around these huge package tenders. So bid managers are really important for that. So that's another branch that is project management, not directly called project management, but again is transferable skills. So they're called bid managers. So that's another really good point from Matthew there.
Brilliant. Thank you so much, Matthew. So there was a question around advice for anybody just starting out in the industry, and I think I've got 3 things. Pooja, please do jump in if you can think of anything as we go along. But I think the key ones for me is, and you will already be aware of these ones, connecting, and not just in the terms of networking and stuff like that. The most powerful kind of method that I've found, especially in the project management industry, is get yourself into a hub, right? Whether that's a weekly call that happens as part of this project management mastermind or part of a Facebook group. There are some really, really powerful and really, really useful Facebook groups or LinkedIn groups, mainly Facebook, to be honest. I haven't found any great LinkedIn project management groups, but Pooja, you might know some, but some great Facebook groups. So, and you just kind of accumulate this network of people, and you know, you become part of the conversation around project management. So I'd definitely say that has been the biggest one for me. And you know, once you've got those, you know, that certification, or you've done a few webinars, however you choose to do that in terms of learning some of those project management skills, treat everything then like a project. And you're just using those templates, using those online pieces of software, use a different one each time if you can, just to get familiar with them, and just treat everything like a project, so that it doesn't become hard selling yourself as an event manager who now has, you know, project management skills. So I think that's the second one I'd say. And the prevailing thing that I've heard every week in these sessions is people skills. Every project manager has started it. Now, event managers are, I think, you know, Kim said, you know, they're the people, right? That's what event managers are. And you've already got this breadth of knowledge and understanding about that. And it's just, I think, about honing that in terms of understanding about how to motivate people, because project management is slightly, from my experience, I found it slightly different to what I was doing as an event manager, to understand about how people were motivated and how I could get people to do stuff without pointing a finger and telling them to do it. So there's slightly different kind of people skills and personal development skills that are well worth delving into, so that when you go straight into a role, you're then prepared. But the hub thing is the biggest thing. Get into a hub, and just utilize the people that are then going to be talking about you, and kind of harness that, I would say. Pooja, anything to add?
Just build on one thing you said there about, bringing project management into every part of your life. I also think there's a mental thing of not seeing these titles or these jobs as like, oh, I don't fit that. It's like ignoring what the job title says and looking at what they're looking for, because in my head an event manager is no different to a project manager, and I think that's the state that you have to get into, or seeing a job and just having a look to see what it involves, because just because you haven't done that title before, it doesn't mean that you haven't got the skills that it needs to do that job. And in my head it's all very much the same. Like, in order to manage an event, the same skills would be used to manage a project. Like, some of the tools you may use or the software may be slightly different, but the core fundamental skills in my mind would be exactly the same. So sometimes it's making sure that your own mind isn't a barrier to allowing you to apply or reach out or go for those jobs.
Absolutely. Such a big one. That mindset one is huge, and the imposter syndrome keeps coming up, and stuff like that keeps coming up week on week. And these are all things that we can tackle, right? These are the barriers that actually more to do with us than anything. Brilliant. All right. Well, thank you all so much. Thank you for your patience for my technical issues. Thank you, Pooja, for recording and for being with us today. Thank you all.